Hello, Olivia. How are you doing?
Good, how are you?
Doing great. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
So thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you for the audience. Today for Brazil and Olivia, you are in Germany. Is it correct?
Yeah, I'm based in Shanghai, but I've been stuck in.
Sure. That's great. Guys, welcome everybody. Today is pretty different to my audience because we're gonna streaming. We're gonna have this live conversation in English. So we're gonna talk about China. We're gonna talk about Chinese platforms and Chinese e-commerce. It's pretty intense topic and pretty interesting because China is gonna booming two days and maybe since 2015, pretty intense in the e-commerce and video platforms and other social medias. I'm gonna talk about this today. Olivia, just introduce you to our audience, and then we're gonna start chatting. Okay? And if I misspell your name, please correct me. Okay? Guys, Olivia is a China marketing specialist, and today we're gonna talk about how innovative our China social and e-commerce platforms are. Okay, so she helps brands in China understand how to reach consumers on social media and help them to develop strategies and contents to grow awareness, build trust, and increase conversion. She is specialized in social media marketing and has been working in agencies in China for the past 5 years, most recently in Ogilvy, Shanghai office. Today, she runs her own boutique marketing agency based in Shanghai, working with small and medium enterprises to launch and execute social media marketing strategy and large corporations to train teams on China about marketing trends. So welcome, Olivia. Welcome to our audience. And I will just introduce our topic and I will pass the ball to you. Okay, Olivia? Nowadays, China is booming. China is pretty the main market. We had last year the Singles Day earning more than 38 billion US dollars in just one day, and for those targets and for those markets, China is pretty intense because it has more than 1 billion population and a consumer that's pretty intense, reaching through social media, reaching through Alibaba's, Baidu, Tencent, and other platforms. And nowadays, here in Brazil, the main app is TikTok, as known in China with another name. And in China, people can use the artificial intelligence also to consume products and to be vloggers and to also spread the content to their network. So we have these main platforms in China. We have the social media. What do you think, Olivia, is going to be the next step for these Chinese brands in China? And then we analyze the other situations here in Western countries. But what do you think it's going to happen in China right now with those pandemic situation? Do you think the consumer is going to be consuming the same way they consume, or going to be a flourish to the e-commerce and QR code or facial recognition or other kind of technologies that's going to flourish right now in China?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I think to start out, it's important to acknowledge that China is already, I think, years ahead of the West in terms of social and mobile commerce. In the West, I think a lot of people have this perception of China as being like a developing country, a third world country. But in fact, when you live in Shanghai, Beijing, or you go to Guangzhou, any of these major cities in China, you're never using cash. there already are facial recognition systems in place. You are already, shopping virtually. You're already going into unmanned stores. The level of technology and the level of adaptation is just something that doesn't exist really anywhere in the US or in Europe or in South America. So in terms of the ability and the potential, China really has a lot. You asked about, what is happening now because of the pandemic. In the West, certainly we see all of these people turning to the internet, turning to, Instagram, a lot of Instagram lives these days, Zoom calls, all of that stuff. This was already happening in China, but the pandemic really accelerated this. So what happened is people in China already shop online constantly. Social media and e-commerce are completely integrated platforms. You're not on social media and you're not on social media shopping basically. So it's a very integrated system. But what happened during the pandemic was people turned to e-commerce for everything. So groceries, ordering all these house appliances, anything that they were doing offline, it really all switched to online. And in China, because the pandemic, has we're at a different stage in China, the West right now. So people are going outside, people are able to gather again. So the level of social media usage and online usage has definitely returned back to normal. But some of those behaviors that we saw during the pandemic are still happening. So we saw a lot of people actually turn to e-commerce to order their groceries on. And McKinsey just ran a study recently to gauge, how much of those behaviors are still around right now. And 55% of consumers said that they would still groceries online even after the pandemic is over. So I think a lot of the behaviors that the pandemic kind of accelerated will be there to stay. There's not really a shift or return to normal. Another really that happened during the pandemic was live streaming. So this has been going on in China since 2017. There is a really popular e-commerce app called Taobao, where you can buy anything that has ever been produced in the world. You can find it on Taobao. And what live streaming looks like on Taobao, basically imagine like we're on this Instagram live right now. Imagine that we're selling products. So like selling tea. People watching this live stream right now could be able to see products that we're selling on your screen right here. They could add them to their cart, and basically just by scanning your thumbprint to your home screen, they could purchase those products, they would be on the way to them, and they would never have to leave Instagram, they would never leave our live stream. So it's a completely seamless process, very easy process. So this has been happening since 2017. And last year it really gained a lot of steam, like a ton of people turned to live streaming. It became very, very popular method. But during the pandemic, we actually saw, I think it was a 240% year-on-year increase between February and March of live streaming. And actually, we have now 560 million Chinese internet users are watching live streaming. So this is about 60% of people accessing the internet are watching live streaming. So it's a huge, huge trend. And I think that's only going to continue in China. So if you want to know anything about, how to sell in China, should definitely be in your vocabulary. Other than that, I think, when you were introducing me, you said something I hear all the time that, China has so many people, so many consumers, right? There's 1 billion consumers. So it sounds like a very attractive market to a lot of people. But that's actually the biggest mistake that we see is people come in and they think, okay, there's 1 billion consumers. How could I possibly go wrong? If I just get 1% of the population to know me or like my product, then I will be rich, right? But I would argue that Chinese consumers are much more tricky than Western consumers, more brand savvy. You have to do much more to attract them in terms of loyalty and retention. and you have to be on so many more different platforms in a very unique and calculated way that I think a lot of brands run into trouble, or people just really underestimate China for this. So there's a lot of interesting things happening in China. I think that was a huge mouthful to kind of throw out at first. So maybe if you have specific questions based
Sure.
on.
Sure. I've been in China in 2010. I went to Guangzhou province near Taiwan, and it's been pretty interesting to know that in 10 years, China developed like booming in digitization, and the AI is coming really pretty intense and fast with Alibaba, Tencent, Baidu, ByteDance, and other companies. And my perception here in Western, mainly in Brazil where I live, is that the pandemic situation is opening spaces to baby boomers. So they are like pretty concerned about how to use the smartphones to buy something. Now we started to have the e-commerce through some retails, and they are okay. So in this situation, I was in lockdown, so I need to consume in another ways. So they are trying to open their minds to consuming more throughout the internet. What is your perceptions through this point of view, through the pros and cons about the situation of the pandemic in Western and in China, that they already struggle with the pandemic in the first, in last year in December 31st, and then now starting to go to schools, and the kids going to school again, and people already going to living somehow the same life again. So what's your point of view about the pros and cons in this situation in Western and in China?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of parallels. There's a lot of similarities, but what happened in China and what's happening now in the West. And you mentioned that people are looking to consume content. They're looking to be entertained. In China during the time when everybody was on lockdown, we saw a lot of people, because of course social media usage went up. There was a lot of discovery of new brands. So brands were actually able to use this time to their advantage, and the ones that were creating content and really providing value actually saw a much bigger return afterwards. So we had quite a balance of some clients, just felt that it was too awkward of a time. They shouldn't be creating content, and they really stopped. And we had some clients, use this time to really genuinely provide value to their community, help people create really good content. And those people engage, more people discovered them. They actually got, more followers, new followers, people discovering them because they were looking outside of their usual content platter to discover new brands. And so these brands, now that everything has picked back up, they're actually getting a much higher sales volume, and they have much more loyal customers because they really use that time as a time to engage with people. And so, at the beginning, it was interesting because we were seeing really the same thing happen in the West. A lot of brands either were just completely silent, they felt it was too awkward of a time, or they didn't know what to do, didn't know how to respond. But the brands that have really been providing a lot of value, like one great example that I've seen on Instagram is the brand Away, which they are like a travel brand. So they produce luggages. So you would think that it would be very difficult for this time, as of course no one is traveling. But they've used it to put out some really great content on social media to connect with people, find other ways that people can use their products. So they've gotten really creative, and you've actually seen their following go up during this time, which, as a travel brand, that's all they could hope for at this time. So it's been interesting to watch kind of a very parallel reaction between what happened in China and in the West. But I think if brands have anything to take away from this at this time, it's that, you can't really remain silent or quiet. You really have to use this situation to your advantage, as tough and as horrible and as heartbreaking as it is. you can actually, turn this around and I think get innovative, use the tools that are available to you. A lot of people are doing creative things, getting on different platforms, testing them out. So now is the time to do that for sure.
Yeah, as I'm seeing now is the best time to, if you don't have the social media and the internet presence, now is the time if you don't have. And for those who already have, is the time for booming the revenues and the social media marketing. And I would like to talk about a pretty interesting topic right now, which is WeChat and smart apps, because as we see in technology ecosystem, we talk that China was a copycat for technology, and then during maybe 2012, 2013, maybe 2015, the the game changed, the game shifted the sides, and China started to develop the education system and develop the technology mindset and technology consumers, the way the consumers were there started to advance. And then nowadays we have the smart apps in China, and the culture of smart apps in Brazil or in USA, they tried to boost, but it's pretty not intense until now. So, in your perception, why the Chinese market and Chinese people, the Chinese consumers, pretty different in this perspective and this situation? Do you think they are early adopters, more early adopters related to our consumers here in Western, regarding the culture, regarding the structure of the technology? Why people here in Western does not consume the smart apps and in the way the China market consumes?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. When I went to China in 2012, and WeChat, was just starting out. It was founded in 2011, and before WeChat, and before most social media app really using anything to act. They weren't on laptop computers like everybody in the MacBook at that time, or a smartphone. Basically, they were at level 0 at this time. They were using cat everywhere, people, it's anything like this. Then 2000 chat launches, and they really brought on a lot of this very quickly. And in 2015, 2014, they started with mobile payments. So you were able to pay, other people, link it to your card and send them money. You could start paying at stores for things with your WeChat. And so people all of a sudden from cash to mobile payments. So there wasn't like anything to get rid of. We didn't have to lose this use of using cards all the time. So I think the adaptation was much faster. Now we have in China almost 98% of the population is accessing the internet with a smartphone. So everybody is accessing the internet through mobile. There was very, very quick, rapid adaptation. And as we know, WeChat is really the super app of China. Everybody has it. WeChat now has, I think they hit 1.2 billion users. China obviously has 1.4 billion people, so you can pretty much bet that everybody in China is on this app. And it started out as just a basic messaging app, so like WhatsApp. And then people could add each other, add contacts, and you could have a conversation with them. But where it really diverges from WhatsApp, and I think why WeChat has been able to develop into such the super app, is because it started allowing brands to create accounts on WeChat. So a brand, let's say Nike, Apple, they could create a WeChat account and have followers on there. So now we're able to talk to people as if we're more human. We're able to connect with them. So brands could start pushing out content to people in between your personal and your work messages. Then in 2018, WeChat launched mini programs. So what this is actually an app within an app, basically. And as a brand, you can have a mini program and people can still be in WeChat, so they never leave the ecosystem, and they can access your mini program to purchase, clothes or services, anything like this. You can do a whole host of functions with mini programs. But it's a very, very sticky app. So everything happens within it. Your browsing, your messaging, social media, your payments, everything like that, so that you're never having to leave the ecosystem. And we're just now starting to see this. Facebook, I think last week, launched shops, what they're calling it. It's still not up to the level that we see in WeChat, but it's certainly getting there. And so, to go back to your point where you said China was really a copycat of innovation in the past, but now actually everybody else is turned to China to copy China and copy what they have. We see the success of TikTok. TikTok is a hugely popular app that started first in China under Douyin with the parent company ByteDance, which is a Chinese company. So I think a lot of tech, a lot of social media trends are starting out and are happening first in China. I think that goes back to and has a lot to do with the fact that the entire population is accessing the internet through their smartphone. So everybody is already really using apps. They're browsing. They're spending a huge amount of time on their phone to access the internet, as opposed to maybe a desktop where you're browsing through Google. You're looking at keywords, things like this. That's just not the behavior, not the user behavior in China.
And do you think it's a question of time that the TikTok in the Western countries becoming the Douyin in China? Because as I research, as I know that the Chinese TikTok, the Chinese Douyin is pretty different related to how people can consume brands and can consume products. Do you think it's a question of time that ByteDance is going to apply this technology and this kind of service in their platform here in Western countries, in TikTok application?
Yeah, I think it's only a matter of time, because I think, as people, and especially I think as the pandemic has brought more and more people online and more people used to purchasing things online, it's only going to open the door for them to bring on brands and add that functionality for people to purchase stuff online. I think, in the West, people require a lot fewer touch points with brands to buy things, so they don't need as much information. They don't do as much kind of background research as a Chinese consumer will. Chinese consumers are, they do a lot of research on brands, so they go to a lot of different touch points before they purchase something. There's a huge amount of mistrust. There's a huge amount of skepticism. So they really do a lot of research on all these different platforms. And to purchase something, it has to be very easy and very convenient. And there has to be, this level of loyalty programs built in, or retention marketing built in. So that's all, I think, happened already in China. And it's only a matter of time before something quite similar takes hold in the West. I don't think it will look exactly the same, because there's just different behaviors, different consumer behaviors. But I think the pandemic has certainly kind of brought to light that a lot of these functions in China would be really useful to have in the West.
And how about your point of view regarding the Taobao's Alibaba's platform, also the JD and other platforms that is increasing the revenues? Because as a research, JD is in this pandemic, maybe the first months, 2 months, they increased their revenue in more than 200 and people using and trying to apply the e-commerce more often. Mm-hmm. So in this situation in Western, of course, Amazon is the leading company. Do you think there will be more places for those Chinese companies to come into West and starting to make money here, or do you think Amazon is already build an empire, and it's pretty difficult for the culture and for the people to adapt to the Chinese marketing in Western countries.
So I don't think people would in the West necessarily use like Tmall and Taobao and JD as it's used in China. It's a very confusing, I think, confusing layout for consumers in the West. Like there's an insane amount of information. There's tons and tons of product. It's just kind of very different to what we're used to. But you mentioned that a lot of JD and these e-commerce players in China are increasing their revenue. That's thanks in part to a lot of initiatives by these platforms and by the governments as well to bring merchants onto those platforms. So we see it's not necessarily that people are buying or spending more money, but they're buying things that they would have bought offline normally, or we have a lot of like farmers getting onto these e-commerce platforms and selling their products direct to consumers. So I think that concept of being able to sell direct to your consumer without having a storefront is going to be very appealing for a lot of Western companies. I'm not in a position to say whether or not players like Alibaba or JD, I think will make it big. I think Amazon probably has to do a lot of shifts in order to get to the level that Tmall and JD are at. I think if Facebook and Instagram really roll out the shops feature, I think they can be a huge e-commerce player because everybody is already on the platform. We already follow brands, we already follow influencers. So to be able to push products easier would be a great thing to happen on this platform. And I think that could really kind of punch a hole in Amazon's revenue. But yeah, we just have to wait and see. It's certainly accelerating, I think, with more people going online.
And definitely, maybe this is the secret for those companies, technology companies, as you said, Facebook. If they started to shift their users from the social media to a place like WhatsApp and introducing the mobile payment in WhatsApp, just like they said, but they never did.
Right.
In India, they started, but they never did pretty intense, like they said. Exactly. So they use they use their data, they use all the portfolio that they already have, and then introduce to another technology. So maybe this is the next wave of consumerism. Yeah, the people who already had their account in Facebook or other social media starting to move to another smart apps, like we said, in Western.
Exactly.
In your perception for retail and for e-commerce, and as my perception, we need to remove the frictions to buy. So less is better. Yeah. So just one click, just a smile, just an image of your face in facial recognition. So why do you think in Western we did not improve the mindset and the way we consume, if we already have the technology using in China and we can apply in our daily lives here? In Brazil, we still like laggards in the technology. We just see what's going on in China, in United States, in Europe somehow, but did not apply it like they applying their daily activities. Maybe it's because concerning about the culture, but somehow it's related. The Brazilian culture, the way we consume, it's somehow related to how Americans consume. So in your perspective, how we can make less frictions to the way we consume in the coming months and the coming years? In your perception, will be facial recognition, will be another technology? What do you think will be the next wave of consumerism in retail and e-commerce?
I think a lot of it comes down to trust. So I think in the West we have a very we're very slow to trust any e-commerce sites or to trust things with our credit card information or our privacy. It's looked upon a lot differently, whereas in China it's it's, I think, given a little bit more freely, or it's not so top of mind for them. They're not so guarded with this type of information, which is partly, I think why people have adapted to mobile payments so fast and connecting all their bank and personal information so quickly. So I still see that as a huge barrier in the West. I think a lot of people, especially, baby boomers, anybody 45 and older, 55 and up, I think they would have a really difficult time adding their information or purchasing things online just because they're giving up that element of privacy. And even younger generations, like just giving up that privacy that people know, what you're buying, what you're browsing, things like this. So yeah, I don't see that the adaptation happening so quickly. I think unless there was something that was really found to be very, very secure, that people would trust it more. Another issue to purchasing online, I think, is this other part of trust, which online certainly helps with live streaming. So being able to live stream a product and talk about it and show people brings such a higher level of trust. So for example, if we're talking on this live stream again and we're selling products, people are able to see us using it. They're able to see us, either hold it in our hands or use it somehow. And this takes away a huge amount of friction, because, if I just see a picture of some shoes or a picture of some makeup, I don't necessarily know how it looks on me. So I think there's, selling online is a very double-edged sword. On one hand, you have people who it's very hard for them to give up that privacy, and then on the other hand, it does create a lot of trust if you do it correctly, if you use digital platforms correctly to build that trust with the person.
Yeah, like they said, yeah, data is the new oil. Like if you manage like a makeup company, we are chatting and we manage some emoticons or emojis here and then appear like our blush and other kind of makeups in your face, and we just click it and buy. Okay, they have our data, they have what kind of colors we like the most, and then that's why, of course, Western is concerning more to privacy and all the data that we inform to the companies.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, even more now because the breaches is getting worse right now. So also the laws that concerning the data, and they're not an international law regarding the protection of this data. Each country or each state has, like California, has a different law regarding informations. In USA, Brazil has its own, and then Europe and other places in the world. So maybe the interest is pretty much intense for those companies and for those politic sides, if we see in this perspective.
Yeah.
So what's your, for us to close this amazing talk, Olivia, what's your perception regarding the fact that we are shifting the consumer's mindset, we are shifting the way we consume, the way we will consume after everything starts to getting again in the ordinary life? What do you think will be the next wave, like like they said, the next normal, they said here in Brazil and maybe in the world?
Yeah.
What in your perception will be this kind of see the way we consume, this kind of see the way we deal with your daily activities regarding the social media, regarding the e-commerce, and regarding the technology?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's, as we're seeing in China now, there's going to be much more, I think, adaptation of digital. I don't think digital is going to replace offline interactions. Like, I think people are still hungry to have experiences that happen offline. But I think they're going to be much more willing to adapt digital as an aspect of that. So, in China, we talk a lot about offline to online integrations where this happens very seamlessly. Like you purchase something, you're at an offline shop, but you purchase something by scanning a QR code, and that then enters you into the system where you can have a deeper experience online. So I think, in the rest of the world, we're going to be looking for ways that we can track people's, footprints from offline to online and have a much more seamless experience for people. I think in terms of what brands can do during this time, is really focus on providing great content. And I know we say content is king for a long time. That's the hugely, I think, overused buzzword in marketing. But I really believe that this pandemic has given the opportunity for brands to create content which has a purpose. I don't think that people are going to buy or, be loyal to brands who don't have a purpose anymore. People are going to be much more guarded with their money. They're going to be much more careful spenders in the future. So anything that doesn't have a real purpose or really meaning is not going to catch your attention. It's not going to have your loyalty for very long. So if there's anything that brands should be doing or thinking about is really how can we create really great content around a purpose that's going to help people. And we've seen huge success with brands in China that have been doing that at this time.
In addition, I would say that this way of purpose consuming, also the sustainability, because the world's like never before had the climate change and all the situation like this, and the industry is collaborating for those society habits and in the way we consume. So I would add also, in my point of view, sustainability in order to move, to shift the way people consume. And for close our talk, the last words, and if you can say to our audience a book, a series, or a movie or documentary that is gonna like shift the way and the mindset, they will improve the way they see the consumers, the retail, or other anything that you want to add regarding informations.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of great information out there on what's happening in China. You can, one of the greatest podcasts that I like to follow, the China Marketing Podcast, very easy to search it. That's where they have a lot of interviews with industry experts and key consumers in China as well. And in terms of books, I think it's hard to read books about China because things happen so quickly there that once you publish a book, it's pretty much outdated. But yeah, I post a lot of news from other people and updates on my LinkedIn as well. So it's a great place to go for if you're looking for resources or want to learn about more what's happening in China.
Okay, guys, thank you very much for the audience. Thank you, Olivia. Please follow her on LinkedIn, and there is a pretty information channel. I love to read the information that Olivia posts right there. And thank you for your time, Olivia. Thank you very much for this talk. It was pretty interesting. And have a great week.
You too. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.